Hello and welcome back into the My Wheelhouse Basketball Podcast on the We Got Balls Podcast Network. I am your host, Seamus McNamara, joined in this new year, 2022, January 2nd, by my dear friend, Al Biddies Natola. Biddies, do you have any resolutions?
Kind of like continuing one of just making a list of all the habits I'm trying to build up. So trying to meditate more, trying to learn Spanish, and just having that list every day. It's good accountability system. So make the list.
Meditating Spanish
It's an
lists.
umbrella, the umbrella of resolutions.
This is a good approach. I think you're going to be setting up in a good way for the upcoming year. We come to you as the Boston Celtics. Try and be more connected with all of the people I care about. Is a resolution I have. Along with probably some that I'll make up along the way. We join you on Sunday night. Boston Celtics just mounted how many points were they down in the fourth quarter? 15 points to the sad, hapless Orlando Magic. Jaylen Brown with a 50-burger. It looks like they're going to pull it out. There's like 4 seconds left in overtime right now. He's giving himself a good argument to be on an all-star ballot, which is coming up soon, and that is going to be the topic of discussion for our podcast today. It's been about 2 weeks since we last recorded. I'm going to try and do a 2-week review and do it quicker. We recorded our last podcast in the week leading up to Christmas, and that week saw some good games on Christmas Day, sans the New York Knicks getting blown out by the Atlanta Hawks in MSG. Jokic had another game-saving block, second one this season, this time against the Warriors. Oklahoma City continues to struggle with its own identity, and I think they're seventh in the reverse standings. They have some work to do if they want to get a top pick. The Cavs beat the Raptors by 47 points. The Boston Celtics roller coaster continues with losses to the G League T-Wolves and G League Clippers, blown leads to the Sixers and the Bucks on Christmas Day. But the bizarro version of the Celtics also snagged a convincing victory on New Year's Day against the 27-7 Phoenix Suns behind a bow. Robert Williams, triple-double. They took down a depleted but still reputable Cavs team that I believe you were at that game.
I was in attendance. Taco Bell was the starter, so I don't know if we're talking about people.
Depleted. I said depleted. COVID continues to run rampant with postponements for games. Players are missing games left and right. DeMar DeRozan fortifies his MVP candidacy. He will be likely in the discussion that we're about to have with back-to-back buzzer beaters, the first one being just outrageous off 1 foot, and the second one would be similarly outrageous if not for the one that preceded it. So, and then I think what was the other buzzer beater that happened? Oh, John Morant had a double clutch buzzer beater against the Phoenix Suns. I'm sure there's plenty of things that I haven't mentioned, but just a brief recap since we last discussed. Is there anything that's stood out since we last talked, maybe about Christmas or any NBA action that you've watched in the basketball world?
Streets are alive here in Chicago. Got a nice DeMar DeRozan billboard not too far from the apartment. Loving seeing the Bulls back. And I did accurately predict that if the Celtics beat the Cavs, then they would go on to lose to the Bucks on Christmas Day. So doing a little bit
as their season goes, although the resolve we saw tonight to come back against that team is not something that we're familiar with in recent games. With that being said, let's jump into our main talking point today. The All-Star balloting comes. It's active now. I don't know when voting closes, but in the coming months, we will be announcing all All-Stars. So I figured it would be a good exercise to see, even though it's maybe slightly a fool's errand with a number of these guys that have missed games because of COVID and some because of injury. But we're going to do our best to break it down and shake things out. Do you want to start in the East or the West?
East is what I put in my notes first. So let's go East.
Let's do it. My starting lineup, I think the forwards are a lock. I got Joel Embiid, Kevin Durant, and Giannis Antetokounmpo for the East forwards.
Yeah, KD is leading the scoring race, possibly leading the MVP race, depending on who you ask. Giannis is making a convincing case to solidify himself as the heavyweight champion of the NBA. Is right there with KD in the MVP race. And Embiid's putting up 26 and 11 plus 4 assists. And if they either had Ben Simmons or had talent in that spot that Simmons occupies, then I think they'd be right with the top 3-4 in the East, as opposed to I believe they're in the 6th spot now.
Yeah, I mean, after a hot start, they kind of had a little bit of a stumble when Embiid missed a couple games. And out of those 3 guys, he's the name that is probably the least lock of the trio. But just because of not another name existing, I think he deserves to be there. And I think this is a problem I'm having in general with both teams. I have too many guards. I have too many guards that I want to make the team on both teams. I have guards that I'm putting in forward slots, and I'm like stretching the truth of whether they're actually a forward. Like I'm just taking liberties because it's not that there's not enough good forwards. I just feel like a lot of the forwards that not necessarily are typically in the discussion, but maybe it's because of the health or because of COVID. I feel much more confident about all-star performances or all-star elections of guard talent. So with that said,
I went positionless in my picks, and I think I only have one like true front court player, and even then he's a wing. There's no big man on my bench.
Right. Yeah. With that said, my starters in the backcourt for my Eastern Conference team are Trae Young and DeMar DeRozan.
Okay. So this will be our first split.
Let's hear it.
Because I'm just taking the Bulls backcourt, baby. Give me DeRozan and give me LaVine. I mean, they're the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Atlanta, Trae's having a great season. Trae is on my All-Star reserves, no doubt. But they're in the bad part of the standings with us, with the Celtics. The Bulls are number 1 in the conference. DeRozan's averaging 27 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Zach LaVine is averaging 26 rebounds, 26 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. Chamberlain rebound numbers. And I think both guys are just very deserving. They're scoring a lot of points and playing winning basketball. And that's a really good way to get yourself on the All-Star team.
I think you're 1,000% right. And as you have Trae Young on your bench reserved as an obvious selection, I obviously also have Zach LaVine on my bench as a lock for making the roster. I think that, to me, it's clear that DeRozan has been the 4th best player in the East. Plenty of people can say that maybe he's even exceeded Joel Embiid this year, purely based off of what we've seen and because he's been healthier. I have issues with DeRozan on my priors, my previous biases, maybe restrict me in terms of giving him the credit he deserves. But
I was surprised you gave it to him.
I mean, it's weird because for years and years and years in Toronto, he was one of the most overrated players in the league. He could get you 25 a game in the regular season, but as soon as the postseason rolled around, he turned into the biggest and most air-inflated pumpkin that you could possibly imagine. As the years turned and he changed teams over to San Antonio, everyone just completely forgot about him. And he wasn't playing playoff basketball with San Antonio in the short stint that he had there. But what he was doing was improving his game in ways that were necessary, not in as many ways as people would like you to think now, but he improved dramatically as a playmaker and as a guy who could get efficient offense in a variety of ways. He didn't improve as a defender, and he didn't improve as a shooter outstretched beyond the three-point line, and those continue to be the 2 biggest warts in his game, but they haven't really been an issue for him in his success of the Chicago Bulls so far, clearly, with what we've seen with the number 1 seed Chicago Bulls. So it would have made it a lot easier for me, and we're going to talk about this essentially right now, because I have problems filling 3 forward spots on my bench. It would have made me a lot easier if I could put DeRozan on my bench, because I feel more confident with him as a forward than I do like Zach LaVine or James Harden as a forward. You know what I mean? So yeah. I might, even though I think DeRozan deserves a starting spot, maybe I'm going to swap Zach LaVine as a starter because I think you're right. He also has had a season that is commensurate with an all-star starter. So I'm changing it live. My starters are Trae Young, Zach LaVine, Joel Embiid, Kevin Durant, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. My bench forwards are now DeMar DeRozan, deserving of a starting spot, but because of technicalities, now on the bench. And the Boston Celtics duo of Tatum and Brown. And I understand that that's going to get a lot of nose up in the air because of the Celtics record so far this season and because of all the hoopla and nonsense that is circulated through media and discussions in general. Overall, these guys are just two of the 20 best players in the league. They're obviously two of the best 6 forwards in the league, even though Jalen probably has designation as a guard more so than a lot of the other forward designated options. But I just thought that they were clear choices. Who were your bench forwards?
Yeah, so I'm also bringing along Tatum for the ride here. And I kind of have him grouped with Trae Young. I know I'm going a little off script. I have him grouped with Trae Young as, your numbers are there, and if your leadership level was at your play level, then we'd really be cooking with gas here. But that's unfortunately not been the case for Celtics fans and for Hawks fans. Couldn't get Jalen in there. He's only played in I think tonight was his 22nd game, so he's even behind LeBron in terms of games played, and I just had a hard time getting him there. If I gotta get forwards in there, I'm also going to change live on the fly. I know I just hit Jalen on games played, but because his team is playing a lot better, I will let Jimmy Butler in as a forward. The Heat are playing a lot better basketball than the Celtics. I think Jimmy's around like 23 points per game. So I'm going to let Jimmy in, even though he was initially off. And last guy, I suppose I'll go with Chris Middleton just as a sort of tip of the cap to the play that they had, carrying over. Hey, congratulations, you won a championship. And now they're playing really good basketball again when Middleton has been in the lineup. The Bucks have been winning a lot. And it's kind of a tough pick. Like, I just really didn't want to put Jared Allen in. I don't want to create a one-time All-Star. I don't want to Jamal Mashburn back in like 01. I don't want to do that. So I guess I'll just keep in an All-Star like Middleton.
So both Middleton and Jimmy were the first 2 names on the outside looking in my honorable mention list, meaning we're going to have some movement here between what our bench lineups are. Obviously, I have Jalen and you don't. I just think that it's a little weird because like the baseline thought process is to look at standings and to see teams at certain places and say, okay, well, this roster's here. They should have an all-star. And I understand that that's a thought process that in most years makes sense. But the Miami Heat are like succeeding and winning games because of replacement players. Like, how many games has Jimmy Butler played? 20? Has he played? He's played less games than Jalen.
I think he's like 1 game behind Jalen.
And Bam's been out for the large portion of the season. Kyle Lowry's been out for the large portion of the season. In my eyes, if they have an all-star, it's Jimmy, clearly. And I understand he's probably going to make it because of where the Miami Heat are, but they're winning games with Gabe Vincent and Max Strus. You know what I mean? Like, that's the main cogs in their last 9 wins were players that were formerly either not on a roster or it's just like Tyler Hero getting hot for a game, and Tyler Hero is not an all-star. So I had a hard time battling the conventional direction of saying this team is in the playoffs, this team is the 4 or 5 or 6 seed. That means they get at least 1 all-star. So I had Miami Heat getting 0 all-stars, which is obviously crazy because I have a 10 seed getting 2 all-stars and like other teams, the Atlanta Hawks, a 12 seed getting an all-star. But with that said, my bench guards are James Harden, who similarly hasn't played a ton of games, but as of late, he's been ridiculous since coming back from COVID. I think he has, maybe it's not 4 straight triple doubles, but it's 4 straight 30, 10 assist games. And then I have Fred VanVleet as my other bench guard. Who are your bench guards? I know that you had Trae Young, but who was the other one?
Yeah, got Trae Young, and then it would also be James Harden, who, as much was made about his slow start, he's sitting here at 22 points, 8 rebounds, 10 assists per game, and the Nets are a game back of being first in the East. So I think Harden's very deserving, even though if he's your favorite player, that's pretty weird, but
he's an all-star. I feel like when I think all-stars, he's on the list. He's on the short list of guys. Like he's a top. I don't think he's a top 10 player in the league anymore, but he's a top 14, top 12 player in the league. So I think he deserves to be up there with these guys. He's going to get in, if not performance, which deserves it, purely based on merit because he deserves it. Who are your?
I'm into the legacy / inertia.
Yeah, sure. Who are your wild card selections for the Eastern Conference All-Stars?
Okay, so as I mentioned, I didn't have any front court players, so I am a little disorganized right now. How many wild card spots do I have?
You get 2 wild card spots.
2 wild. Okay, great. I need to pick a Cleveland Cavalier, and I'm going to give it to Darius Garland, who is playing really well, and they're winning a lot of games. And I mean, I know I've said that a lot in picking my all-stars, but I feel like those are good criteria, is that you're putting up numbers and your numbers are not empty. You're actually helping your team get some wins. And I mean, they were a team that you would hope would get into the play-in maybe at the beginning of the season, and now they might be hosting a first-round playoff matchup. Second pick is LaMelo Ball, 19 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists. He's got the Hornets right in the play-in conversation, and I think he'll also just be awesome to watch at the All-Star game, his play style. So I think just for the sake of the game, get LaMelo in there.
Yeah, our wild card selections are the exact same. I think Garland is the deserving All-Star from the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think there's a perfectly logical case for both Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen to make the team. I think neither of them. I think Jarrett, as you say, you don't want to pick a guy who's probably going to be like the Sabonis style, even though Sabonis had 2 All-Star selections. The one-time type All-Star. He missed a handful of games. Mobley wasn't healthy, and now he's in protocols. But I think he's been their best player this year. I just think he hasn't played enough games. And Garland has been awesome. His improvement as a playmaker, his shot creation is fantastic. His ability to get in the paint and attack the rim, everything is dramatically improved from what we saw from him last year. I think he's going to be in the race for most improved player. Probably won't win it because of Miles Bridges, who was also on my short list of honorable mentions, but I think he's definitely deserving. And this is the first selection of many for LaMelo Ball. He's an ascending all-star player in this league. I think he's still only, 21 years old? So we're going to see several seasons where he's going to be a 20-point, 8-rebound, 10-assist guy for the foreseeable future. And he has that all-star it factor, that allure, that Hollywood, you're on the red carpet, you deserve to be at All-Star Weekend. I'm sure he's going to be wearing some crazy type of outfit that matches some crazy type of car, and he's going to have weird glasses and a crazy haircut. He needs to be in the game, and he deserves to be in the game.
And I wouldn't be surprised if LaMelo gets voted in as a starter. I think he's probably the most popular player amongst kids. So I could definitely see LaMelo getting in there as a starter, which would be cool.
As we go here, I mean, I have stats pulled up on NBA.com, Basketball Reference, cleaning the glass. And I'm freaking out because I have it organized just by like stats, and then you can sort by whatever you want, advanced statistics or whatever it is. All 3 pages, Jaylen isn't on them. Jaylen Brown is not on the NBA.com stats page. He's not on the Basketball Reference stats page. and he's not on the clean. He doesn't exist. Jaylen Brown doesn't exist in stats.
Ooh.
I can control F and search for his name. He doesn't exist. I don't know what this conspiracy is, but I don't know why he's not here.
Is he not qualified because the game's
It doesn't. I have no qualifiers on. All of my qualifiers are off. I don't have any filters on. I just have per game statistics, and I toggle to advanced every once in a while, and he's not existing. I don't know what's going on. I'm weeding out this conspiracy, this anti-Jalen propaganda. I'm seeing right through it. And he needs to be on the team. You need to change it so he's on your team. But did you have any reserve like guys you felt bad about leaving off? I mean, I already said I had Middleton and Jimmy off, but my other people were Miles Bridges, Mobley, Jarrett, Drew Holiday, and then John Collins was like on a fringe type of people.
No, I mean, I was kind of stretching just to fill out the roster. I suppose Jalen would be one that, if he plays in every game or just about every game from now until the All-Star game, then I may have to walk everything back and say, yeah, this guy needs to be an All-Star.
He just put up 50. He put up a 50 burger. He scored like 26 in the fourth quarter.
And hopefully the Celtics are, not 10.
They got an easy schedule up ahead, but we've seen how they perform against bad teams, so who knows what easy actually means. With that said, let's jump to the Western Conference All-Star teams. I had 3 locks for my starting lineup, and it was Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic, and LeBron James. My other 2 spots I struggled immensely with. I felt confident about my guard selection no matter who it was going to be, and quite the opposite for my third forward selection. I have no clue who to select for my other starting forward. Right now, I have in pencil Ja Morant as my starter over Donovan Mitchell, but I'm perfectly okay if you have Donovan Mitchell or Chris Paul. Chris Paul is perfectly reasonable as well. And then currently I have Luka just because I think he's the best player. But I wouldn't be surprised if – I think he's going to make it purely because he's going to get voted in. But I don't know if he's as deserving as other guys. But then I look at who the other guys are, and I don't – I'm not going to – I don't know who to pick. Who are your starters in the Western Conference?
Yeah, I mean, definitely going through the selection process. Curry, LeBron, and Jokic were all locks. Shout out to Steph. Just really, I mean, you can't tell the story of basketball without him, but he's kind of increased the size of the font in that section of the story this season. So LeBron, as much as some want to call it a down year, is still one of the best players in the league. In what is it, year 18 for him?
19.
Year 19. Totally ridiculous that he still plays at this high of a level, and that when he plays at this high of a level, people are feeling let down by it. That's a testament to how insane of a player he is. And then Jokic, following up the MVP season, I'm not sure if his numbers are better, but they very well could be because he is playing really excellent basketball, carrying his team in spite of the injuries that they've been hit with. And
they're 18-16. How are they 18-16? Their team is terrible outside of Jokic. It's crazy. It's crazy what he's doing.
And I think it's great for Jokic. I think some people kind of have a little discredit for his MVP award because of COVID, because of the injuries that people experience. So I'm happy for him that he's following it up with a season that is most likely going to land him on the first team All-NBA and top 4 MVP at this point. So good for Jokic. Now to the actual question that you asked, who else did I put in? I did go Donovan Mitchell instead of Ja Morant. It's really just 2 awesome players, and I have to choose Donovan Mitchell instead of Ja. And as you can probably tell, I did choose Ja for the reserve guard spot along with Chris Paul, like you said. And then the other forward spot, I went ahead and selected Paul George. Paul George putting up a really good season, and it's not exactly a great Clippers team around him. So I think that even though they can beat the Celtics without Paul George, I think just overall Paul George is having a really strong season, deserving of an all-star. And just like a little bit more than Luka, who has been great, but maybe not quite as great as he should be.
Yeah, I struggled with Paul George. He had such a hot start, and then since then he's kind of not like tailed off, but his efficiency has fell through the basement. Like I think he's barely over 40%. But I mean, he's on my team, and he deserves to be on the team. He's been really good when he plays, and the Clippers, even though they're succeeding when he doesn't play, they're playing at like a above five. They're playing at a playoff level when he's on the court. So he's a deserving selection. It would make me nervous as a starter. I'm assuming you have Luka on your bench. We already said we both have Mitchell, Ja, and Chris Paul. Would Ja be your starter if he had played more games?
I think I see Mitchell in that starting lineup, especially since the Grizzlies did win without Ja. Yeah, I think Mitchell is a slight nose ahead of Ja. Both having awesome seasons, but I think ultimately Mitchell's playing really well, scoring 25 points a game. And I mean, once again, the Jazz are having a great regular season.
Right. Not to say that Donovan Mitchell isn't the charismatic, when you think of all-star, you think of this guy type of player, because I do think he has some of those qualities. I just think that they're much more heightened and exuded inside of John Morant. Like I feel like he's closer to that, what we were talking about LaMelo Ball having, those characteristics of what it means to actually be an all-star. I think of those more significantly and a higher correlation with Ja than I do with Donovan Mitchell. But obviously, I think it's obvious that they're both going to make the all-star team. So you said you had Paul George as your starter. I'm assuming you have Luka as a bench guy. Who are your other two bench forwards?
Okay, so I assume that I can count Booker as a forward.
Maybe. I think that's a stretch, but sure, stretch it. Stretch it.
I have other forwards as my wild guys. My last two was really debating. So I got Booker in there, just continued greatness that we've seen since the bubble, actually. And then the next one, first time All-Star, I believe, Karl Anthony Towns. Super talented player. Still has a ways to go in terms of really feeling like he's realized his potential. But overall, definitely impressed what we've seen from Cat this year. And the T-Wolves are fighting, which is more than we've seen in the past couple of seasons.
You just named my two wild card selections in Devin Booker and Karl Towns. Karl Towns was a last-minute switch. I had DeJounte Murray in there for a while, but I dipped him out just because I think the Timberwolves are better than the Spurs, even though there's a lot of advanced statistics that really like the Spurs so far this season. DeJounte is having a season that is commensurate with an all-star selection. He's on triple-double watch nearly every single night. He's one of the best defenders in the entire league, and he's carrying a pretty hapless team to some strong wins against some reputable opponents. But I had him on the outside looking in. I had Towns in there. He continues to be an offensive dynamo, one of the best shooting big men that the league has ever seen. Defensively, he still is kind of closer to a nightmare than average, but in some games he looks like he could be okay, which is a lot better than it was last year. I think that this time next year, he's probably the second best player on their team if they still have Edwards and him together. But for now, he's still the team's calling card, go-to guy, and all-star selection for a team that has dipped now, and I believe they're now in 9th place, but previously was around like 6 or 7 for a lot of the year. So I think that those both very deserving all-stars. I'm going to surprise you with both of my selections for my other two forward spots. I have Draymond Green and Rudy Gobert as my two all-star picks, starting and my forward off the bench. I just, when I was looking, I want to be careful not to give two people that I frequently discredit too much credit, but I'm looking at the other forward options. And other than Towns, who I was clearly trapezing on whether or not to even put him on the roster, it's like DeAndre Ayton, who has missed too much time, Andrew Wiggins, who is not good enough to be an all-star, or like Brandon Ingram. Like, those are my other options.
Yeah. or Anthony Davis, but then it's just like,
yeah, but he's been out, and when he's played, he's been bad. Like he's been bad. I don't think Anthony Davis has been a top 45 player in the league when he's been playing this season. So I give a lot of credence to the incredible success and surprise that we've seen from the Golden State Warriors inside of their brass and their players. They're pushing hard for Wiggins to be an all-star, knowing probably that Draymond is going to make the team regardless. I don't think Wiggins is going to get in, but we've seen Draymond return to his all-defensive self after having some gross down year last year when the team wasn't good. Now that he's motivated and playing well, he's still frequently borderline liability-ish offensively, but that's very easily masked when you have the dynamo that is Steph Curry next to you. He's still one of the better passing forwards in the entire NBA. He's incredibly smart. He deserves to be on the All-Star team this year, mostly because of the Warriors' success, but also because he's returning to his former self that was frequently in these discussions, much to my former dismay. And then with Rudy Gobert, I just like you look at his stats, and it's very like Dwight Howardy. Like his stat, like he puts up like 22 and 22 frequently. Like he's good.
How many rebounds he having? Like 17. It's absurd.
He's averaging over 15 rebounds a game. And I remember it was one of the podcasts I listened to, maybe like the Saturday Slam and Jam with Andrew Schlecht, where they were talking about guys who have averaged over 15 rebounds in the last 10 years. There's only like 3 guys. It's like Ben Wallace and like 2 other people. So he's been awesome. He's the anchor of one of the better defenses in the league. Utah Jazz is above and beyond the best offense in the league, and that is frequently with him on the court. He has a lot of gravity at the rim. He's one of the better roll men in the league. He needs to improve in a million different ways for them to be able to succeed once they get to the actual postseason, where they've had pitfalls in the past because of his faults. But, I mean, depending on the game you watch, when he gets caught on the island, sometimes he doesn't make a fool of himself, and sometimes he can restrain players on the perimeter. I see improvements in areas of the game that I didn't think that he would ever brush the surface of. His touch passes on the short roll to the corners, he's doing that more and more frequently. So I'm giving both Rudy and Draymond, players that I infamously don't think deserve the amount of praise that they get, I'm giving them some respect here as clear all-star selections. I think they both make it for sure, and they're my forward spots on my bench.
Yep, they were my last 2 wild card spots. I mean, both just similarly not putting up the flashiest of numbers, but they're on 2 of the best teams in the league, and I definitely have that old school mentality of, yeah, let's get the players on the good teams into the games, and everybody else who's in that kind of tier of winning, in that tier of records, they have 2 all-stars. So get Draymond in there, get Rudy Gobert in there. One guy who I wanted to put in just because we've talked about the cachet of the All-Star game, and we just want to put in players that we like to watch, would be Dame Lillard, but it just has not been the season.
They're terrible. They're so bad. They're so bad. We are waiting at any second for a trade from Woj or Shams that includes the Portland Trailblazers in some context. Like, it's got to be around the corner. I mean, every day I wake up that I don't see a trade from the Portland Trailblazers, I'm surprised. What are they doing? They need to move things now. They're like 13 and 23 or something awful. They have one of the worst defenses in the league, and Dame isn't playing that well. Does CJ still have a collapsed lung? He's not going to be an all-star. He's going to be all upset about it. And remember those years in a row, like the 3 years where he actually deserved to be an all-star, and he was campaigning, and it was like, yeah, I agree with Dame. And now he's going to do it again, but he actually doesn't deserve to be on the team now. So looking at it, it looks like we have the same exact roster.
Yeah. So
surprise. Good work. A little rotational differences.
Yeah.
Besides Dame, did you have any honorable mentions that you were sad that you were excluded them from the All-Star game in Cleveland, of all places?
No, not too sad. I mean, I considered AD more than you. If you look at the numbers, he's still great. Not as good as he has been in years past. But no, not really. And to your point about Portland, when we were preparing to talk about the draft, I was looking like, well, depends on who's picking. And when I was looking at the standings, I was like, oh no, Portland. Oh no.
Yeah. When I said earlier that the Oklahoma City Thunder are struggling with what their identity and purpose is, although I think they lost today, so now they're like a little bit higher. But when I was logging all of my records, Portland was ahead of them in the reverse standings. I had
this concurs.
Yeah, I had Anthony Davis sixth on my honorable mentions. I had him behind Lillard, DeJunta. I had him behind Anthony Edwards, who fixed that moxie of an all-star. I think he's going to be a lock for an all-star team next year. He's not going to make it just because he's still inefficient, and Minnesota isn't good enough to get two all-stars, and Towns has been the better player so far this season. I had Ayton as an honorable mention as well as Shea. I think if Ayton played a little bit more games and maybe had a few more points per game, he would be in greater consideration. But he's really rallied and parlayed a great postseason last year with good improvement this year. He's been an awesome defender. His rim protection and his ability to guard in space has drastically improved, and his ability to read the floor offensively, not necessarily as a passer, but just in terms of spacing, where he needs to be, how to communicate and move in sync with the other players on that floor. A lot of credit to Chris Paul, an all-star selection, but I think that he's a future all-star several times over. His time will come. Oklahoma City isn't good enough, obviously, but Shea has had some fantastic performances. And then it's people like Anthony Davis. And I do want to give Andrew Wiggins some credit. Like, he's probably having his best year of his career. I mean, he's only averaging 19 points, and he's had years where he averages 24 or 25 in Minnesota. But he's a legitimate, fantastic defender. His shooting, like, he's a shooter, like capital S shooter now. Like, when you watch the Warriors play and he catch and shoots, like, you used to be nervous that he could hit the side of the backboard or something, and now I'm pretty confident that it's going to go in when he shoots it, even if he's guarded pretty closely. So I give him some credit. It's just a little – the Warriors have been fantastic. They have the best record in the league, and they're the surprise of the league. I just feel like they needed to be, like, even more dominant if they wanted three all-stars, and Wiggins would need to have, like, slightly more intense statistics to actually be there, because I just can't logically put him over Luka or Booker or Towns or these guys.
Yeah.
And then,
I would say that just like a testament to staff, where it's like, yeah, they can just have two all-stars because one of them is Steph Curry. And as I was wrestling over who I was going to put in the East, and Middleton was really one of the last guys I got in there, it's just like, well, yeah, the Bucks can just have one all-star because the one all-star is Giannis, and he's just that incredible. So I think it's fine for Golden State to just have two when one of them is just the
MVP
of all time.
Yeah, the MVP for sure. With that said, it'll be exciting to see how these next handful of weeks go. Who is able to build up a little bit more health and actually bring themselves back into the all-star conversation. I think guys like Jaylen Brown are going to become obvious selections. I think the Celtics are going to right the ship to a degree, enough that both of these guys are going to get voted in as reserves. But for the teams that are struggling to get players in because their record doesn't quite cut it, even if their players may, like a Lillard or a Shea, they have bigger fish to fry in the lottery come June. This college basketball season, if I'm being completely honest, I haven't watched a ton of full games. I've watched a lot of condensed games. The full games that I've watched are back with a lot of fast forwarding and skipping through games that I don't feel like watching the minutia of. But the top of this class, as it's shaking out, it gets more and more interesting the more I look into it as we progress. I think that comparatively, this is probably a class that's much more similar to the 2020 draft class, the LaMelo, Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman class, like at the point of coming into the draft. I'm a little bit lower on the top of it. I think that there could be surprise guys. I was way lower on LaMelo at the time, and I didn't think he was going to be that player. And I had like weird guys, 1 and 2. I think I had like Devin Vassell and Isaac Okoro were my top 2 guys. I think it's not as unusual this year. I do think there's a clear top 3 that we've seen so far. Those guys are Paolo Banchero from Duke, Chet Holmgren from Gonzaga, and Jabari Smith with Auburn. I think that we've seen recently that Jaden Ivey has here and there made a case to be in the point guard for Purdue, but we're going to leave him on the outskirts for this discussion and just talk about those top 3. They're all kind of bigs to a degree. I think Chet is a clear 5. Paulo's a probably 4-5. And then Jabari is probably like I don't even know, a 4-3. Maybe he could play 5. I don't know. Of what brief game film you've seen, and as you bring up the things, I'll bring up some stats so we can do a little summary on each guy. Which guy most intrigues you, and what's your rough ranking of these 3 guys at this point?
Yeah, I'd say the guy that most intrigues me is Jabari Smith, because I really love that shooting stroke. I think he's got the best one of the 3. I think he does a really good job at creating his own opportunities. He's a lanky guy, but he's got the look of somebody who's going to grow into his body. And 3 or 4 years from now, we're going to see the side-by-side comparison and look at how crazy this is. So I really view Jabari Smith as the highest upside player and the guy that intrigues me the most.
I think that's reasonable. I like Jabari. I think shooting prospects, because I believe that's what he is, at his size don't come around often. And when I'm thinking about like player comps, guys like him, it's tough. I'm like looking at like Rasheed Wallace and like Harrison Barnes or PJ Washington. And I don't think that any of those guys correctly capture the level of shooter that Jabari could be. He's currently averaging in 13 games, 16 points per game, 7 rebounds a game, and 2 assists per game. He's shooting 43% from 3. He's a shooter. He's on like 6 attempts a game. I think that it's a skill that is absolutely going to translate. And I think that he has he's one of those players that you can get excited about, and it's reasonable to get excited about. And it's the mold of the 3-and-D wing who at this point in their development is missing various things, but they have some stuff. So like looking back on players that I've liked in the past to draw on this 2020 class, like Isaac Okoro had the D as a perimeter stopper, and he was an awesome slasher. Offensively, the 3 was not there, but he's like a 2-way wing style guy, slasher, had passing upside. It was a good cutter, but like things like shooting needed to come along. Devin Vassell was much better off-ball defender, had more on-ball equity on offense as a playmaker and a shot creator, but similarly like needed a larger sample size as a shooter. What we're seeing as the concoction of Jabari Smith's game is defensively, he looks like he could be great. He seems switchable probably across 3 positions, maybe 4 if he really fills out and gets into the film room. But he can handle people on the perimeter and off ball. He's solid, although sometimes you don't see it often because of the scheme that he plays. And then offensively, it's hard to project the Paul George, Jaylen Brown type development of ball handling that he would need to be like an elite self-creator. So when I project him forward, I see him more as being like, I'm really confident that he's going to be an elite role player. I see him coming into the league being a very, very competent and potentially really good defender who's also going to be like an awesome shooter. And obviously everyone in the league wants someone who's 6'10", 230 and does those things.
Yeah.
So I just don't know if he's going to have the capacity to improve and evolve in the ways that wouldn't be necessary for him to have a turn towards stardom, which would be ball handling, playmaking, shot creation outside of, because a lot of his shot creation is pretty limited and doesn't have a lot of layers to it. But I like what I've seen from Jabari so far, even though I would probably have him. I think I would have him 3. Would you have him higher than that? Would you have him 1 out of these guys?
I got him as 2. And
Okay.
And if I was maybe like an Orlando or a rebuilding Portland, then I might take the bigger swing on Jabari with the number 1 pick. But I do think that Paolo is the can't miss guy of this group. He's got just good basketball IQ, feel for the game. He's strong. He already looks like he can play in the NBA right now. In terms of his shot creation, I think he does a good job at creating his own shot, creates shots that will be there for him in the NBA. And in terms of Paolo being like a true franchise player, I'd like to see more playmaking from him. But if you're Detroit or Houston and you've already got Cade Cunningham or Jalen Green, you can add Paolo and have like a really, really good second guy. Maybe he would have to be the 3rd guy for a championship team, but he just seems really talented, and I don't think he's gonna be bad. I don't think that is in play in his NBA career.
Yeah. So coming in, I think I have Paolo number 1 right now too, and these 3 guys, I think every game I see of them, I'm willing to move them around. But any of them are perfectly fine. I just don't think any of them are like a superstar. You draft this guy, he's going to be your franchise player. He's going to be the best player on a championship team. I don't think there's any tier 1. There's no Zion. There's no Luka. There's no Cade Cunningham for me. So when I'm thinking about that and understanding that how these players fit into player context, even though I have Paolo number 1, I'm probably more nervous about him than I am about the other guys. I think that his projection moving forward looks a lot like, and you got to be careful because if things go right, it can be fantastic. But he's got a lot of like Tobias Harris, Carmelo Anthony, like Julius Randle, players that at their best are like, yeah, they can be all-star level players, but a lot of it is purely because of not inefficient, but like maybe ineffective shot creation that's more beneficial to the player and less beneficial to the team.
Yeah.
Sometimes those things can overlap and be hand in hand, but not always. And I think that like he's averaging 17, 7, and 2, and his shooting splits are fine. Like he's like a 33% from 3 on only 3 attempts, and he's 83% from the line on a decent amount of attempts. So that's promising.
Yeah.
But it's weird because my prior scout to Paulo was that he was an incredibly high IQ offensive player, really good ball mover, and really, really good in transition. But what we've seen from him at Duke is like he's an awesome isolation scorer from the nail, post up, high post guy. He can get any shot off he wants, and he's really a smooth scorer. And he hasn't played a lot in transition.
Yeah, I'm sure it's partially because he's at Duke, but like sometimes I'm like, oh, that's a Tatum move right there.
Right. It honestly, it is similar. And I didn't watch like any, what was it? Chaminade? What was Tatum's high school? I didn't watch any Tatum high school basketball, but I watched some Paulo basketball, and it's very different. So I know that he has a feel for the game as a passer that he has not displayed. And I know that he has the ability to get out and transition and be more of maybe a rim threat, and I think that he can space the floor. So like a lot of things I like hypothetically, but I'm just nervous. Like when you watch him, you become almost like entranced, and you're like, I'm watching Michael Beasley at Kansas State. Like you know what I mean? I'm just like, I don't know. Like, is he just going to be a 20 point per game, 7 rebound a guy in the NBA? Is he going to be Tobias Harris? Tobias Harris is on the worst contract in the league. Like I don't want Tobias Harris with my number 1 pick. So I will give him some credit because an area where I wasn't confident in him at all was defensively. He was very 2-footed. one-footed. What is the right? Whatever it is. He had 2 left feet in high school.
Incorrect.
Yeah. But defensively, he's been an awesome communicator, and he's really been causing a lot of events. I think he's averaging over 2 blocks and steals combined a game, and it shows on the game film. He's active in passing lanes, and he's strong in man-to-man defense. He's not that great on the perimeter on a switch, but he can handle people like size. He can handle people that are bigger than him, and like small forward size guys, if they're not crazy explosive, he does pretty good against. So I like Paulo overall, but I'm probably more excited about Jabari, and I'm definitely more excited, even though I'm more doubtful, but more excited about Chet Holmgren. Chet Holmgren out of Gonzaga, he's averaging 13, 8, and 2 with a staggering 3.5 blocks per game, a ridiculous 70% true shooting. I think he's making over a 3 a game on like 36% from 3. He's a string bean, but he's really a joy to watch. What have you liked and seen from Chet so far?
Yeah, I mean the ball handling and the shooting for a guy that size is pretty remarkable to watch. The defense is better than I would have expected from a guy with his frame. And he really is a good rim protector. I think the thing that I worry about is the opposite of what I see with Paolo, where I feel like Paolo looks like he can be in the NBA right now physically, and the play style he does is like, yes, this happens on an NBA court. With Chet, he's going to look really small next to certain guys, and I don't know how long he can play at the 5. So then do you have to put him at the 4? How's he going to defend on the perimeter in switches against NBA guards? And then he's 7'1", so are his feet and legs going to be good for a long time? Ultimately, I just don't see him having really any potential to be a lead scorer. And if I'm making my number 1 overall pick, and I know he's not going to be a lead scorer, and I also have questions about how his defense is going to translate, and then all of a sudden I'm just picking a guy who I feel good about because he can shoot threes at 7'1". That's a tough guy to pick number 1 overall. I just when I watch him score, I'm just like, I don't know if he's going to have that opportunity to score at the NBA level.
Right. So I am really excited, and I want things to go well for Chet. He's listed at like 190. And that might be giving him a lot more credit than his body actually deserves. He might be closer to like 175. He is like skinny, string and bones. But what I see in terms of the archetype of a player out of this draft class, I haven't dove crazy deep into all the players so far, but I throw NBA player names next to the prospects' names as I see players. And I like my concoction of players for Chet most. I think he's a blend of Kelly Olynyk and Dikembe Mutombo. And it's just how far he goes is going to depend on his ability to stay healthy and his ability to slightly get in the weight room. Because I don't think he needs to put on a ton of weight, but he needs to be closer to like 215, 220. And right now he's a far cry from that. So I'm not nervous about him being like a Mo Bamba, who hypothetically is like a similar archetype as like that style as I'm talking about. And the biggest reason I'm not nervous about that is because of his mentality. He's like fierce. Like he's like angry. He plays with fire, and he's intense in a way that I don't see any other prospect in this draft class being intense. He is passionate about defense, and when you hear him talk about defense, he's like knows what he's doing. So I think he can come into the league and be one of the 5 best rim protectors in short order. And the stuff that we see offensively is like all hypothetical. It's like Poku offensively. It's like it's a mystery box. Is he going to be dribbling behind the back in transition and shooting pull-up threes, or is it just not palatable at all? So I don't think he's an offensive option. I don't think he's your first, second, third, maybe even fourth option offensively. I think his success in the league is going to depend on his conditioning and depend on the team that he lands in, lining him up in the correct role for him to be as effective as possible. Because I just want him to be a pick and pop, pick and roll big. I don't want any offensive sets that go through him. I just want him to be a play finisher. And I think if that's his role, and like sprinkle in some play and transition as a guy who can get out, he can grab and go. Some of his grab and goes are like really exciting, like catch blocks, like Bill Russell catch a block and straight off the block, he's already past the 3-point line and dribbling, and he's got a longer stride than anyone on the court. And then he pulls up smoothly into a three, or he kicks out to a wide open shooter. So Chet, to me, has by far the most enticing skill set of these three guys. It's just that it's also the least likely of being a hit because of his frame and just because of that archetype of player. But like, if you look at his games, like, I understand it's against like Dixie Cup State or something stupid, but he's putting up like 15, 6 and 7 blocks games. Like, it doesn't, like, he does like really weird, stupid games. And when we've seen him play top level competition, like that Duke game where he went head to head with Paulo, he got the best of Paulo. He shut Paulo down at the rim. He looked fluid and confident. He shot the ball well. I don't think he made a three in that game, but I'm really, really intoxicated by what Chet could be. And right now, I think I have Chet third out of these three guys. So that should kind of tell you like how I'm thinking about these three people in relation to each other. But it's going to be a really interesting race. I'm excited for him, and I hope he goes to a team like, if he gets drafted by the Sacramento Kings, like, it's over. Like, his career has 0% chance of being successful. If he gets drafted even by like Orlando, or I feel like he needs to go to a team either with supporting cast players or an organization stability where you know that they're going to take the right steps. Like, if he went to Detroit with Cade, I would get really excited. If he went to Oklahoma City, purely because I think they take the right approach with their players, I think that would be great. But once you start talking about the Orlando, the Houstons, the New Orleans, even though I really like him fitting next to Zion, it's like you start getting a little nervous about projecting how successful his career could pan out.
His fourth coach in his third season might mess with him a little.
You're 1,000% right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly root for all these guys, especially the ones with really unique skill sets like Chet. But I definitely have some doubts.
I think with that, we can close it out. We'll continue to watch these draft prospects. Maybe next time we have a draft talk, we can bring in some more guys. There's a few guys in the draft class that I'm definitely curious and interested in. We'll see how accurate we were with our all-star selections. I feel like I'm pretty confident about I think I'm going to be right on the Eastern Conference starters. I don't think Zach LaVine's going to get in, and I think they're going to finagle DeRozan in. But we'll see how it goes. Obviously, it's subject to change. Who knows? Players could get nixed with the COVID protocols by 2 hours from now, so we never know. But Biddies, it's always great chatting. Thank you for joining me on the My Wheelhouse Basketball Podcast. We'll do it again sometime soon. Please, if you're listening, do the rating and the reviewing on the Spotifys and the Apple Podcasts and all of those things. But until next time, Happy New Year, Biddies. I hope your resolution lists continue to go smoothly and you're motivated in the right way. Adios, senor.